Yes, of course. Miscommunication is inevitable sometimes, and yes, when it happens, it can lead to tragedy or comedy. A while back, writer David Sedaris moved to France, where he enrolled in a school to study French. He was the only American in his class. And as he explained to an audience back here in the States afterwards, his problem wasn't just miscommunication. No. There was also his teacher, who could be kind of mean.
Oh, she would throw chalk at people and stab someone in the eye with a pencil one day and would hold your homework paper over your head and show everyone the mistakes that you made. So I wrote a story about her, and she read it, and I got thrown out of school. So this is another story about her. It was my second month of French class, and the teacher was leading us in an exercise designed to promote the use of our latest personal pronoun. Printed in our textbooks was a brief list of major holidays alongside a scattered arrangement of photos capturing French people in the act of celebration. The object was to match the holiday with a corresponding picture. Today's discussion was dominated by a Russian nanny, 2 chatty Poles, and a pouty, plump Moroccan woman who had grown up speaking French and had enrolled in the class hoping to improve her spelling. She'd covered these lessons back in the 3rd grade and took every opportunity to demonstrate her superiority. A question would be asked and she'd race to give the answer, behaving as if this were a game show and if quick enough she might go home with the tropical vacation or side-by-side refrigerator freezer. She'd recently transferred to the class and we could not wait until she was booted up to her appropriate level. Midway through the first day, she'd raised her hand so many times her shoulder had given out. Now she just leaned back in her seat and shouted the answers. Her bronzed arms folded across her chest like some great grammar genie. We'd finished discussing New Year's Eve and the teacher had moved on to Easter, which was represented in our textbook by a black and white photograph of a chocolate bell lying upon a bed of palm fronds. And what does one do on Easter? Would anyone like to tell us? A brave Italian was attempting to answer the teacher's latest question when the Moroccan student interrupted, shouting, "Excuse me, but what's an Easter?" Despite having grown up in a Muslim country, it seemed she might have heard it mentioned once or twice, but no. "I mean it," she said. "I have no idea what you people are talking about." The teacher then called upon the rest of us to explain. The Poles led the charge to the best of their ability. "It is," said one, "a party for the little boy of God who call himself Jesus and, you know, like that." She faltered and her fellow countrymen came to her aid. "He call himself Jesus and then he die one day on 2 morsels of lumber." The rest of the class jumped in, offering bits of information that would have given the Pope an aneurysm. "He die one day, and then he go above of my head to live with your father. He wear the long hair, and after he die the first day, he come back here for to say hello to the peoples. He nice. He make the good thing, and on the Easter we be sad because someone make him dead today." Part of the problem had to do with grammar. Simple nouns such as cross and resurrection were beyond our grasp, let alone such complicated reflexive verbs as to give of yourself, your only begotten son. Faced with the challenge of explaining the cornerstone of Christianity, we did what any self-respecting group of people might do. We talked about food instead. "Easter is a party for to eat of the lamb," an Italian student explained. "One too may eat of the chocolate." "And who brings the chocolate?" the teacher asked. I knew the word, and so I raised my hand, saying, "The rabbit of Easter." Sebring of the chocolate. My classmates reacted as though I had pinned the delivery on a house cat. They were mortified. A rabbit? A rabbit? The teacher, assuming I'd used the wrong word, positioned her index fingers on top of her head, wiggling them as though they were ears. You mean one of these? A rabbit? Well, sure, I said. He come in the night when one sleep on a bed. With a hand he have the basket, like for a bread. The Moroccan rolled her eyes and the teacher sadly shook her head, as if this explained everything that was wrong with my country. No, she said. Here in France, the chocolate is brought by a big bell that flies in from Rome. I called for a timeout. But how do the bell know where you live? Well, she said, how does a rabbit? It was a decent point, but at least a rabbit has eyes. That's a start. Rabbits move from place to place, while most bells can only go back and forth. And they can't even do that on their own power. On top of that, the Easter Bunny has character. He's someone you'd like to meet. A bell has all the personality of a cast iron skillet. It's like saying that come Christmas, a magic dustpan flies in from the North Pole, led by 8 flying cinder blocks. Who wants to stay up all night so they can see a bell? And why fly one in from Rome when they've got more bells than they know what to do with right there in Paris? That's the most implausible aspect of the whole story, as there's no way the bells of France would allow a foreign worker to fly in. There's no way the bells of France would allow a foreign worker to fly in and take their job. That Roman bell would be lucky to get work cleaning up after a French bell's dog. And how does the bell hold the candy if it doesn't have any arms? How does it get into your house without being heard? It just didn't add up. I suppose similar questions could be asked of the Easter Bunny. I just never thought about it that hard. Nothing we said was of any help whatsoever to the Moroccan woman. Clearly disgusted, she just sat there, her lips positioned as if to spit. I wondered then if, without the language barrier, my classmates and I could have done a better job making sense of Christianity, an idea that sounds pretty far-fetched to begin with. In communicating any religious belief, the operative word is faith, a concept illustrated by our very presence in that classroom. If I could hope to one day carry on a fluent conversation, it was a relatively short leap to believing that a rabbit might visit my home in the middle of the night, leaving behind a handful of chocolate kisses and a carton of menthol cigarettes. So why stop there? If I could believe in myself, why not give other improbabilities the benefit of the doubt? I told myself that despite her past behavior, my teacher was a kind and loving woman who had only my best interests at heart. I accepted the idea that an omniscient God had cast me in his own image, and that he watched over me and guided me from one place to the next. The virgin birth, the resurrection, and the countless miracles, my heart expanded to encompass all the wonders and possibilities of the universe. A bell, though. That's f***ed up. Thanks.
Now this story of people trying to better understand each other. Will Powers works for a marketing firm called Brand Solutions in Seattle. And his boss wanted everybody in the firm to understand better the principles of brand loyalty and how to achieve that. And so, the boss had Will and the other staffers do this exercise where they had to market themselves to another person, to someone they knew, using all the tools of modern brand marketing. Will chose his wife.
Really, why not my wife? She's probably the closest person to me, and I think as you'll see later on as I discuss it, it was a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about that customer.
It's so strange to hear you say that word.
I know, and it is funny, but it's really interesting. Obviously, I don't think of my wife as a customer. I dated my wife since we were 15, and we went to the same college, and we got married right after college, and we've been married for 5 years. And when I went home to do this exercise with her, I was like, oh, there's nothing she's going to tell me that I don't know. I know her inside and out.
All right, well, let's talk about the process you went through.
I had my wife come up with her attributes and what's important to her within the product.
This is what
I'm
she's
providing.
looking for in her husband.
Exactly. She came up with honest, funny, forgiving, patient, understanding, strong, protective, empathetic, loving, and gentle. And to take it a next step further, I said, well, these are really great attributes, but tell me how I can act upon these. How can I, the organization providing the service, please you? And it's really saying, where can I find ways to better provide the service to you?
Now, if you were actually working with a real firm that was really selling a product, this would be more or less the equivalent of like focus grouping the customers. You'd get a bunch of customers, you'd get them into a room, you'd focus group them on what it is that they really want from the company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Me being the product, how can I show you that I'm loving and gentle and understanding and empathetic, et cetera? What would be a way that I could follow through on these? So she actually gave me examples. When you hold my hand, you make me laugh, to take time out of the day to make sure I'm happy and okay, hang up your clothes after a business trip, try to stay healthy, work hard, work for our future, work at our relationship, examples like that. So what I just said, and this is what we usually do in organizations, we do a brand ladder. An example would be like we work with some major restaurant chains, and they might list something like it's clean, and that's a very functional attribute. Well, okay, when the restaurant, if they're concentrating on that and it's clean, how does that make you feel? Well, that makes me feel comfortable at the restaurant. Okay, when you're comfortable at the restaurant, how does that make you feel? Well, it makes me feel that I can forget my problems. Well, then when you forget your problems, what does that make you feel? Well, then I can concentrate on other aspects of my life, like my children. So we go something from very small, functional, from clean, to concentrating on children and full fulfillment. What I said is if it works for an organization, once again, why couldn't it work for me selling my product? So after my wife listed her examples, I pulled one out and I said, okay, Laura, well, picking up my clothes, let's say when I come home and I throw my garment bag on the bed and I'm supposed to hang up my clothes. Sometimes I don't. I just dump it out, and usually I'm exhausted. But I said, let's just start with that. Let's say if I pick up my clothes, what does that do for you? What is that going to give you? And she goes, well, really what that does for me is that confirms teamwork, that we're a partnership in this relationship. And I said, okay, that's great. And knowing that we're a team, well, how does that make you feel, or what does that give you? And she goes, well, when I know I'm a team and you're helping me out and we're really working as a team together, that leads to strong relationship.
It makes her feel like she has a strong relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And that she, can rely on me. And I said, well, that's fantastic. Well, what do you get when you have a strong relationship? How does that make you feel? And she goes, well, that is total love and total reassurance. And I said, wow, that's really great. So I went from something very simple as picking up clothes from my garment bag when I come home from a business trip, very functional, to total love and strength. But and another example was calling me, and I'm usually pretty good about that when I travel or even when I'm at work, calling her. But
just to call her during the day, during the work day?
Yeah, just to see how she's doing and stuff. And maybe some days I would forget or I'd be busy. But now I make it a point because obviously she's a customer and she's viewing my product. That's important to her. And as a customer, I know I'm going to satisfy her that way. Same with coming home and hanging up the garment bag and the clothes within it.
It really strikes me as you talk about this, one of the things about it that I think is interesting is it makes you really think about how often, do any of us go to the people in our lives and ask, are you getting from me what you want?
Exactly. And really, in a nutshell, that's exactly what this accomplished. Are you satisfied with the product?
Yeah. Before you actually went through this process with her, had she always, she would say every now and then, like, I want you to pick up, you shouldn't leave your stuff, your garment bag, you shouldn't just leave it sitting around, I want you to pick it up. I mean, she'd said this before?
Yeah, obviously, these aren't really big, earth-shattering.
No, I know, but to me, that's what the interesting thing is that why was it so different doing it in this context? Why is it in this context you got the message, whereas before you didn't?
Well, I think it's in the past, I've come home and it's always been just something kind of under the breath of, I would appreciate if you would have called me or something to that effect. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay, next time I promise I'll try to remember. But I think the reason why this was so powerful is we actually sat down across from each other, and it was just us, totally focused on each other. There was no other distraction. She's saying, and she actually wrote it down. This is what's important to me. It's almost very elementary, spelling it out.
It's almost like, you know what it's almost like? It's almost like there's like the way that women talk about certain emotional issues, and there's the way that men talk about certain emotional issues. And what you and your wife sort of invented was a guy's way to talk about stuff that women normally want to talk about.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's like she spoke to you in guy language.
I guess so, because I could put it in business terms. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's how I connected with it, and the light bulb kind of went on. But I wanted to do this with my wife because my wife is the most important person in the world to me. And I place my wife above anything else. And so she is the number one customer in my organization. And I have to make sure that she's 100% satisfied and happy with the product.
It's not exactly clear when the members of the family in this next story declared war on one another. And as wars go, this one was mostly covert operations. The son was a student at Beverly Hills High School, and everything you're about to hear happens within the real-life zip code 90210. Kids there had a lot of money. Some of them did a lot of drugs. And the son in this family started doing drugs too, in a pretty serious way.
I failed English. I failed PE even, which is difficult to do unless you're running off getting stoned whenever you're supposed to be running around the track. And I just, I just did whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. I stole money from my parents kind of regularly to finance my marijuana habit. I did break into my parents' tenants' basically house a few times, mostly to steal drugs, not money. But that was the only stealing that I did. I never actually stole anything except for drugs and money. And the money I only stole from my parents. Well, I noticed my dad started to punish me for things that I hadn't done, or at least things that he couldn't have possibly known that I had done. And it was, I would have a great weekend planned, for instance, and we were going to go out and do whatever sorts of craziness would come up, maybe we'll go take some LSD or something like that, or mushrooms, and my dad would ground me the day before, for no particular reason, and it was very strange. The timing was uncanny. And one day, he was driving me down to school, as he did every morning, and on the way to school, he told me that the administration of Beverly had contacted him, and that they had narcs in the school that were posing as students, and they were going to run a sweep of the school and basically bust everyone who was involved in this. So he told me that the administration had contacted him because they knew that I was involved in this whole faction of bad eggs, and they they also knew that I was not a dealer. Basically, they were calling him to warn him, to basically give me a chance to get out of the bust. So he told me, I'd better get it together because it's going to happen very soon. And then in the same conversation, he started, naming all of the names of the kids that were involved in, and there were names that there was no way he could know. And so the story was very credible, the way it was laid out. And I believed it 100%. And I went to school that day, I remember, and I told all of my friends that there was going to be this major bust happening at Beverly Hills High School very soon. And so everybody better quickly go undercover. And people became much more careful. About a month later, I was in the backyard, and there had been a windstorm the night before, a really big wind, and a panel on the side of the house had come off. And I was in the backyard with my friend, and we were smoking a joint, like we always did. Every day after school, we would come home and smoke a joint. And my friend noticed this panel down. I'll never forget this one, actually. He said, "Dude, what is this? Come here, dude." And I'm like standing on the other side of the backyard, smoking a joint, looking at the trees. And he's like, "Come here, dude." And I walked over. He's like, "Look at this." And it didn't dawn on me. I looked at it and I was like, "What is it? Strange piece of machinery inside a wall." It made no sense to me whatsoever. And he looked at me, he said, "Dude, your parents are taping your calls." And that meant that Dad knew everything. No wonder he was grounding me at such crucial moments, in my party life.
I'm getting some buds and some Coke delivered here tonight. Really? Yeah, so listen, if you guys want to come, just call me before you come. Well, you can come over here if you want. Really? Yeah, because they're going out, so... You don't have 5 grams. Dude, what's the big deal? I'm bumming hard. You're getting an eighth for 25 and a gram. Alright, I guess I can... Is that cool? An eighth for 25 and a gram for 10? Uh-huh. Alright.
When I saw the tape recorder, it was disbelief. I was in a state of disbelief, pure shock.
This is what happened. My son was a very good student. All of a sudden, his grades started collapsing. His school thing started collapsing. He started acting like a complete fool. He's becoming an asshole everywhere. So I thought, the only way I can figure out what's happening with him is because he comes home every day and he's alone a long time at home. Got a lot of time on the phone, right? So I figure, well, what I'll do is that I'll tape record his phone calls. So I went to a lot of people who knew about this kind of stuff, and I said, how can I do this?
Working.
Unbelievable. I can't believe that this is going on. It was a multiple emotional sort of cascade, because on the one hand, I'm being incredibly violated by my father.
But we gave him whatever we could give him, everything we could possibly give him. And then I felt real violated by the fact that he thought that was nothing. What meant something to him was that he wanted to do these things that he wanted to do. He wanted to be with these people he wanted to be with.
Dad, I went home today during 5th mod. Yeah? You turned my room upside down, didn't you?
All I know is that there was a note on our front door from Annie.
That said,
It said someone has been in her apartment again, taking certain things,
what? What was missing?
some drugs.
There was a note on
Have
it.
you been going into Annie's again?
No. I got that one bud from my friend, and that's all.
I want to know, did you go in her apartment again?
Dad, I can't get in her apartment.
I want to know, did you go in her apartment?
Yes. And I took one minute bud. I didn't take drugs. I took one small bud, and I left.
Okay, you go to work. But tonight I want to have a little discussion with you. Because I'm going to have to try to find out where you're coming from.
Dad, I'm not
I
coming...
just think I've got you figured out and something else happened.
No, Dad. No.
He never came to my work during the day when he was going to school. Never. He'd start coming to my work, and he'd start going at lunchtime, and he would say, you know, hey, I just came over to see if you guys needed any help or if there's anything I could do or whatever. And then he'd leave, and there'd be like $100, $200 missing from the drawer.
Shit, I hope Scott didn't score that stuff.
Why?
Because I want my money back.
Because you want to buy blow, or you just don't want it?
No, I have to give that 100 back to my dad.
He knows?
Yep.
How do you find out?
I don't know.
The tapes were horrible, redundant, stupid, dull.
He goes, check this out. And he just hit the accelerator, and the thing took off, man. It's so fast. It's so rad.
You know, a teenager gets on the phone, they stay on the phone for a long time. Hours. I would come home and I would have to listen to like 3-4 hours of tape of him on the phone saying nothing. I mean, dribble, like, hey, man. You know, what's up? What are you gonna do? Hey, what are you gonna do?
Hello?
Hey,
Hey.
what's happening?
Not much. How's Palm Springs?
Alright.
Really?
But the interesting part was that things would come around like, what are we going to do tomorrow? Hey, why don't we do some coke? Why don't we do some... I mean, what I tried to do was that whenever I heard something on this tape that was like a direction he was going to go in, I would say, could you help me at my shop tomorrow at 4 o'clock? I really need you. And he'd go, oh, well, I'm busy. And I'd say, I don't care how busy you are. I really need you. This is important. And he would shut off the plants, and he would come and help me. So what I tried to do by listening to the tapes was to redirect whatever he was going to do. And I did that. And it worked. It worked.
This doesn't have anything to do with parents, man. We're talking serious matters.
Dude, what happened?
Like Beverly Hills Police Department.
Dude, why?
Because
I'm not going to tell anybody, don't
because of my known
Involvement?
with drugs at Beverly Hills High School. They've been calling my dad and asking him if he've ever... You know what they said to my dad?
What?
My dad named so many names to me that I've never even said to him.
Dude,
He
man,
just
they
said-
can't even follow you.
Dude, it's everybody. They've got about 50 undercover narcs at my school now.
What you should do is just stop it, bro.
That's what I have,
Dude,
dude.
don't even talk to those people.
I have been. I fully just stopped.
There was no way I could possibly confront him and have a truthful situation come out of it. No, he would never admit that to me. Never.
Because I was a conniver. I was going to come up with the best solution to escape. So after some thought, I decided that the best road of action would be to continue my lifestyle, of course, and while simultaneously becoming perfect on the telephone. In other words, I would just clean up my act on the phone.
You're quitting.
I swear, that's it. It's caused me too much trouble.
Aren't you gonna miss it?
No way. Fortunately, pot is one of those things that you, like, outgrow, kind of. Not really, like, it's not like you mature out of it, but you get bored of it.
Yeah, did you get the acid?
No, dude.
When do you get it?
I'm not gonna do it, dude. I'll get it for you, but I'm not gonna do it.
You're not gonna do it? Why?
No. Dude, I'm going straight, man. I'm quitting. Now all I have to do is regain the respect of my father.
Well, that went on for about a month. It went on for about a month of me being perfect on the telephone. And it worked. He stopped busting me at crucial moments. I was able to go out and do everything I wanted to. It was counter-espionage, I guess you would have to call it. And it worked. It had gotten to the point of deception upon deception upon deception. I mean, multiple lies on both sides. So I was very disturbed by the fact that my relationship with my father had so apparently deteriorated. My father means a lot to me, and he did then, and he always has. And I realized the degree to which we had grown apart, basically. So one night, I went out with a couple of friends of mine, and we took some LSD, some very strong LSD that we bought down in Hollywood from a dealer who was down there at that time. A guy by the name of Strange was his name, actually. He was an albino. I think he's dead now. But anyway, in the throes of this LSD realization, enlightenment that I was going through, I realized that the situation with my father was completely unacceptable, and it had to be remedied right away. I had to do something immediately about it. So I told my two poor friends who were also right in the middle of their trip, getting involved in whatever was going on in their minds, I said, we have to go to my house. We have to go home right now. So we drove here, and Dad was having a party. There was a party going on. And I walked into the party, rather nonchalantly, and I looked at my father with a very serious look, and I said, I have to talk to you about something. So we walked outside to, the yard out front, and I said, basically, Dad, I know you're taping my calls, and I know you've been taping my calls. Which was such a strange sort of accusation I was making, once again, because simultaneously I was admitting to him that I knew that he knew everything that was going on. So on the one hand, I'm saying, Dad, how could you be so horrible as to invade my privacy like this, while simultaneously realizing that he knew that I had been stealing money from him and to support my pot habits. And he said, you're right, I'm taping your calls. I've been doing it for quite a while, as a matter of fact. And I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to tape your telephone calls anymore. He said, there's something you don't know yet, but I'll tell you now, and perhaps you will not understand what I'm saying. But you think that because I'm your father, and I'm in this role of the disciplinarian, that it's between you and I. What you haven't realized yet is that your actions have far more impact on your own life than they will on mine. I've already made my life. You have to make your life, and you don't know it yet. He said, I'm going to take the tape recorder out tomorrow. And I was waiting for the punishment at this point, right? Because there must be some amazing punishment coming down. Because he knew everything, you know, military school, or what's he going to do? He said, I'll take the tape recorder out tomorrow, and there's only one thing I want you to do. And I said, what? And he said, I have about 40 tapes, about 40 90-minute tapes of you. I'm going to give them to you, and I want you to listen to them. And that's all I ask. No punishment, no, we're not, this is over. This chapter is over. But the tapes are now yours.
Hello?
Hi, what's the matter?
Nothing.
Can I ask you something?
What's that?
Are you waking up to answer?
Yeah, I think I can. If I try real hard.
I get the feeling that you've changed the way you feel about me. And I don't like that.
Oh, really?
I mean, obviously there's nothing I can do, but...
Nah.
Nah, what?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, then how come you haven't called me in so long?
I've been busy.
Well, that's really the truth?
Yeah, I hope so.
It was about a week afterwards, and I couldn't really listen to them. I had a very hard time listening to them. In a way, it was kind of surrealistic because I had no idea what I sounded like. And I didn't like what I sounded like at all. I thought I sounded really, kind of unkind, self-serving, mean, basically, and totally uncaring. I don't feel that way, and I'm not that type of person. But at the time, I was very much, and I didn't know it. I didn't know how little I valued friendship or other people's feelings.
Hello?
Hey, dude.
Hey,
What's happening?
not much.
Do you have any finals tomorrow?
Yeah,
What?
English.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't have any.
I'm kind of busy right now.
I could tell. It sounds like people are in the background.
Well, they are.
Parental units?
Huh?
Parental units?
No. Friend units.
That sounds radical.
Yeah, it is. Bye.
But
It took me about 5 or 6 years before I managed to listen to all of them. My course of life changed dramatically because of that event. And a lot changed. I still partied, but smoking pot ceased to be number one. And, lying, deceiving, cheating, stealing, all of that, I just stopped it all. I'm intensely aware of my effect on other people. That's one thing that definitely came out. The tone of voice of my quote friends, I could hear in their voice in the tapes pain because of my actions and my uncaring. That was an awakening.
I haven't heard from you for a while. Ouch!
I haven't heard from you for a while.
Yes, you have.
Oh, yeah? When?
Last time we talked, I called you. I believe.
Oh, you mean you actually keep track?
No, I just remember that.
That was an interesting look you gave me today.
Oh. Ha, I know.
So what's the problem with you? What are you pissed off at me for?
I don't know.
Is it that time of the month again?
No. That affected isn't.
Well, then what's wrong?
Well, I guess the basic thing is I don't like your fluctuation in attention towards me.
What are you talking about? If I'm not going somewhere, if I have not got a set place that I am off to, and I'm like probably usually late, then I stop and talk to you. And it's like, well, forget it then.
Wait, hold on.
It was valuable, very valuable to be able to witness myself in that way, although painful, to see yourself from the outside, from an objective kind of point of view. I think it's probably always going to be difficult to watch yourself, you know. Given an opportunity, I think most people would probably not want to see themselves that clearly.
If you've ever looked in that part of the paper where they have the musicians' classifieds, you've seen that thing where they'll have an ad like, guitarist seeks drummer. And then just a few inches down, same page, there'll be a drummer looking for a guitarist. And, you know, it's hard not to think, can't you people get together? What would happen if somebody would just introduce the two of you to each other? Well, we decided to find out what would happen. Our producer, Starlee Kine, recruited John Langford from the Mekons to go through the classifieds and create a band constructed entirely from the classifieds. Here's Starlee.
John's never had to turn to the classifieds for bandmates. His band, the Three Johns, were such close friends that all three of them slept in the same bed while on tour. His country punk band, the Waker Brothers, was started at a club one night as a way to get free beer. And the Mekons, who have been together for 25 years, is mostly people he went to school with in Leeds.
We haven't never really decided to form a band. They've just kind of like appeared. It's like you'd be sitting around in the pub and say, well, we need to be in a band, you know. Everybody else is in a band, why don't we have one? So, and it's been people pretty close to yourself and pretty with similar tastes.
We chose 7 different musicians. The only thing they had in common was that no two of them would have played together under any other imaginable circumstance. Ad number 1. Indie rock bassist and drummer available with practice bass in Suburbs. Influences include Shellac, Fugazi, Mogwai, and Blonde Redhead. Contact Ben. This is from their demo.
The death of success! The death of success! The death of success!
Ad number 2. Smooth, sultry, soulful female vocalist seeks jazz musicians for band.
Along a mountain pass there is a patch of grass where the swinging shepherd plays his tune.
Ad 3, an acid funk percussionist named Steve. Ad 4, an electric violinist named Nathan. He's working on a rock opera about a conspiracy theory, and at present that's all he's at liberty to say about it. Ad 5, experienced contemporary Christian worship leader musician plays guitar, available for Bible studies and larger small church situations.
Shall declare your glory, every knee will bow at your throne in worship, O Ancient of Days.
Ad number 6 wasn't like the other ads in the musician classifieds. It caught our eyes immediately.
Theremin effects and song player wants an audition to amaze you. I also play an incredible musical solo. We've got to go and meet this guy.
We're going. We're there.
I tell you what, there's not much amazes me anymore. That sounds terribly cynical, but I'm desperate to be amazed. You know?
The theremin, of course, is the only instrument in the world that you play without touching. You just wave your hand through the air above it, which alters the electromagnetic field. Somehow, this produces a sound like a flying saucer in an old episode of The Twilight Zone. We ring his doorbell.
Hello, Eric. It's John and Starley. Okay.
Eric Muller, the theremin player, turns out to be a retired factory worker who lives in one of those overstuffed apartments where every corner is filled with tchotchkes and souvenirs from all over the world. In other words, pretty much exactly where you'd imagine a theremin player living.
How are you?
Okay, how are you? There are pictures of his wife and family everywhere, and it's the only apartment I've ever seen with a hand-painted mural that covers an entire wall and features both a waterfall and a volcano. Wow. We head into a little room in the back of the apartment, and he flips on the theremin, a thin black box which looks no cooler than a clock radio.
Would you like something classical or would you like something contemporary? What would you like to have? How about Danny Boy? You like? Yeah. Do you like that song? Yeah.
He pops a floppy disk into a keyboard for accompaniment and positions himself in front of the theremin. Eric's a 60-something-year-old man in a royal blue tank top and matching blue gym shorts. He's warm and grandfatherly. If he had reached down and pulled a "Who's Got Your Nose on Me?" I would have been ready for it. But when he sits down in front of his theremin, everything changes. This look comes over his face, a mixture of utter calm and complete confidence. His factory worker hands glide through the air. It's graceful, with a perfect economy of motion. I turn to John, and his mouth is open.
We were going to ask you to amaze us. You did. You just did.
That's how you play it. I know, it's great. You speak the truth. I'm amazed. I told you I'm amazed. I came here. I was going to ring your doorbell and go, Eric, amaze me. But then you wouldn't have let me in.
Before we arrived, we hadn't understood that when Eric says in his ad, "Let me grant you an audition to amaze you," he literally means exactly that. He brings people to his home, plays for them, amazes them as promised, and then never ever joins anyone's band. It's just not what he's looking for.
To be just a part of a big group, I don't know if I could be happy in that kind of a situation. Have always played the solo.
Nonetheless, he agrees to sign up for our band. Later, back at John's house, the difficulty of what we're going to do starts to sink in. What song could unite an acid funk conga player, a sultry jazz singer, 2 indie rockers, a Christian guitarist, an electric violinist, and an amazing theremin player? What one composer could shoulder the burden?
I don't know why I keep thinking Elton John. Maybe we should do an Elton John song, because everybody likes Elton John, don't they? Even I like Elton John sometimes. There's certain Elton John songs I love. I like Rocket Man. I think that's a brilliant song. I think it's gonna be a long, long time since touchdown brings me down again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man. Yeah, I mean, maybe Rocket Man, you could have the space. We could have space effects in it. You know, the theremin. No, we do Rocket Man. Let's ask them if they do Rocket Man.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you, man. That's Sam playing guitar. That's Eric with the theremin.
The big day arrives. One by one, members of our one-day band show up at the studio, where John recorded most of his own albums. Eric, the theremin player, brings his wife. And just like in any situation, the cliques immediately form. The rhythm section hits it off immediately. They make musician jokes like changing the time signature from a 4/4 to a 6/8 that crack each other up.
You met the rhythm guys?
Every band has the guy who's a quiet lone wolf, and in this band it's the electric violinist. He's off in the corner practicing his violin and not talking to anyone. When I ask how he's doing, he tells me he can't hear himself through his headphones. And then he utters the last sentence you hope to hear when you're throwing a group of strangers together in a band.
I'm in anger management, actually.
He proceeds to scare me with stories of other recording sessions he's been in.
Well, it was the same situation. I was in a studio like this, and I couldn't hear myself very well, so I took the violin by the neck, right here, and I basically just, I took it like an axe, and just went bam, and it just, pieces went flying everywhere.
And you done this?
Twice, actually.
Twice?
Yeah. So, we're working on that.
Musicians jammed together a little. The singer Karen had told me on the phone that she hadn't played in public much and felt sort of shy about the whole thing. But there's something about the dynamic of being the singer in front of 6 musicians that as soon as she gets up there, she seems to change, take charge.
Meow.
And the band defers to her. The indie rockers shift to jazz.
One was the papa bear, one was the mama bear, one was a wee bear. They were walking on the deep woods, talking along.
After maybe 10 minutes of this, they know each other well enough to play through Rocket Man for the first time.
Hello, do you want to give a count?
You wanna go?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
She packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then. I miss the earth so much, I miss my wife.
And suddenly they're a band. The guitarist and singer come together immediately, matching each other note for note. The rhythm section joins in shortly after, one perfectly fused unit. The electric violinist jumps in next, followed by the theremin player right on cue. John's standing in the middle of the room waiting to step in, but there's nothing for him to even do. And sure, this isn't a real band, and after today they'll never play together again, and I know it's just a cover of Rocket Man. But everyone in the room seemed to be feeling the same, all light and giddy and sentimental and corny. It came together so easily, like they'd been a band for years. From that point on, everything just sort of falls into place. John takes the musicians in separately to play their parts. The rest of the band eats pizza and zones out, like a real recording session. When it's Eric's turn to go in, his wife straightens his shirt collar and gently touches his cheek. The angry violinist goes in with him, and the two of them playing together turns out to be the highlight of the whole session.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find not the man they think I am at home. No, 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 no. I'm a rocket man. Rocket man, burning out a fuse up here alone.
Eric, that sounds great. I've got a request though. Could you do the classic 1950s flying saucer effect at just about 20 seconds from the end?
Sure can.
That could like lead us out.
Sure.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
That was excellent. Yeah. Fantastic. Does he do this around the house all the time?
Afterwards, John and I go to his house and put on a CD for his wife. He can't get over how easy it was. His recording sessions never go this fast.
Oh, I thought we wouldn't get through it for hours. And there might be some, arguments, and people might think that some people weren't playing, well enough, or maybe it means that people have put actually taking out a classified ad implies some sort of like skill or confidence, or desire to go in there prepared and ready to sort of show off your stuff, Maybe it's like when you have bands who are just all friends, then you can have people who, can't really play that well.
Before we formed the band, John said there wasn't enough amazement in his life. But since then, he hasn't ceased to be amazed by all the lucky accidents and connections that came out of the classifieds.
I didn't tell you about the taxi driver. I got the taxi driver today. I get in a taxi, he goes like, "Okay, sir, which way do you want me to go? Which way? You will be the commander-in-chief, and I am just your lackey, I'm just your flunky, I'll take you whichever way you want to go." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, no, I don't want to be the commander-in-chief, you be the commander-in-chief." And so, "May I ask you what you do, sir?" And I'm like, I'm a musician." He's going,
I too like to play, an instrument. And he whips out this huge flute. He gets to the traffic lights. Yeah, see, he gets to the traffic lights, he starts playing. Now, tell me what you think of this. And he starts blowing. He starts blowing his flute, and he's playing the flute. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to record a bunch of people who are like never met each other. What am I going to do? He's just like join the band or something? So he stops at the next light. He goes like, let me try you in the higher register. So he's like, if I could have got him and Eric together, it would have been like. But then I said, you know what I'm doing today? I'm going to a studio to record a load of musicians who've never met, and I could sneak you in if you've got like a couple of hours free and you want to come in. But I said, what are the chances that I'd be doing that and somebody would start playing music to me? And a taxi driver, he went like, are you familiar with the writings of Jung? And he just pulls it up and he says, look, synchronicity. That's what Jung talked about, synchronicity. And that's why he was my taxi ride to the studio. And it was perfectly, it didn't seem odd to him at all. But he couldn't come in, he was very busy. But he gave me his phone number.
Ours ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. In fact, it's cold as hell. And there's no one there to raise them. If you did, and all the science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week. A rocket man, a rocket man. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find not the man they think I am at home. No, 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 no. I'm a rocket man. Rocket man, burning out a fuse of pheromone. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Well, music can bring people together, and it can push them apart. Sarah Vowell learned this as a teenager growing up in Montana, where she was in marching band, band one, symphony band, jazz band, pep band, orchestra, and the Bozeman Recorder Ensemble. She told the story at a broadcast that This American Life did in front of a live audience in San Francisco.
It was autumn in America, a fine, hot Indian summer day. Pretty high school girls sat on bleachers with the sun shining on their pretty hair, watching handsome high school boys play football. And then it was halftime, which is where I came in. I was standing in line in my silver spats down past the end zone, waiting to go on. I was in 11th grade. I was in marching band. I had a foot-tall fake fur black hat with the vaguely processed food name Shako strapped under my chin. That not only prevented me from breathing, it prevented me from balancing, so that even though my job was to march around as some kind of sick metaphor for teenage military precision, I moved through time and space with the grace and confidence of a puppy walking on a beach ball. Because of my double shortage of strength and coordination, I barely passed gym, but somehow I was supposed to lift a baritone horn that measured twice my body weight, blow into it while reading microscopic sheet music, step in a straight line while remembering left foot on beats 1 and 3, right foot on beats 2 and 4, and maneuver myself into cute visual formations like the trio of stick figures when we played the theme from My Three Sons. And then, halfway through the halftime program, I had to break formation, drop my baritone horn on the field, and sprint to the 50-yard line, a long haul, with everyone in the band, everyone in the bleachers, everyone on the sidelines, watching and waiting, silent and still. And then I picked up my mallets. This is what they had been waiting for, a xylophone solo on a little Latin-flavored number called Tico Tico. My polo shirt-clad nemesis, Andy Heap, stood up in the stand screaming, "Val! Val! Woo! Woo!" as the laughter of his friends at me drowned out the horn section. This was the same Andy Heap, I might add, who earlier in the week in music history class had delivered an oral report on Tchaikovsky's mistress and referred to her as Mimi throughout, even though her name was Nadia. Andy Heap was apparently smart enough to publicly humiliate me during Tico Tico. He just wasn't smart enough to know that the abbreviation MME period stands not for Mimi, but the title Madame. Anyway, I only had a second to stick out my tongue at Andy when I finished because I had to let go of the mallets, rush over to my baritone, again the freeze-frame spectators, the loneliness of the long-distance runner, and I'm back in formation with the low brass for the finale. And I was getting academic credit for this. I was getting graded, which begs the question, what exactly was I supposed to be learning? Marching is not a particularly applicable skill in later life. And ditto all the other handy things music classes taught me. The E-flat minor scale, the alternate fingering for D sharp. Here then, some of the lessons, actually useful ones, I accidentally learned while pursuing music. Accidental lesson number 1, Marxism for 10th graders. Once a week, the best band kids played with the orchestra. I played the bass drum in orchestra, which meant that I never got to play. My participation ratio was something like 75 measures of rest per one big bass wallop, which gave me plenty of time to contemplate the class warfare of the situation. And here's what I figured out. Orchestra kids wore tuxedos. Band kids wore tuxedo t-shirts. And the orchestra kids with their brown woolens and Teutonic last names had the well-scrubbed dark blonde aura of a Hitler Youth Brigade. These were the sons and daughters of humanities professors. They took German. They actually played soccer. Dumping the fluorescent t-shirts of the band kids into the orchestra each week must have looked like tossing a handful of Skittles into a bowl of Swiss chocolates. But nothing brings kids together like hate. And the one thing the band kids and the orchestra kids had in common was a unified disgust for the chorus kids, who were to us merely drama geeks with access to 4-part harmony. A shy violin player wasn't likely to haunt the halls between classes playing Eine kleine Nachtmusik any more than a band kid would blare Land of a Thousand Dances on his tuba more than 3 inches outside the bandroom door. But that didn't stop the choir girls from making everyone temporarily forget their locker combinations thanks to an impromptu, uncalled-for burst of brigadoon. Andy Heap, chorus. Accidental discovery number 2. Where's Walter? My junior high had an electronic music lab. We made tape loops and learned words like quadraphonic. In my spare time, just for fun, I checked out all the books on electronic music from the library. My favorite records for a while there were Walter Carlos's concept album Switched on Bach and its sequel, The Well-Tempered Synthesizer, which offered what I thought were hilariously witty covers of Bach classics performed on, get this, a Moog synthesizer. But in my readings on electronic music, something puzzled me. Every time I'd look into Walter Carlos, the information would just stop and someone named Wendy Carlos would turn up. I got to school early one morning to ask my electronic music teacher what happened to Walter and was Wendy Walter's wife or daughter? And my teacher kind of didn't answer for a long time, and then he blurted out, Wendy is Walter. What did he mean? Walter had a sex change operation and changed his name to Wendy. What's a sex change operation? Now, I know it's hard to capture now, here in San Francisco. What a shock this was. I knew absolutely nothing about sex. We didn't talk about sex in my house, and sex ed wasn't scheduled until spring. That Walter Carlos, I hadn't even recovered from the shock that Bach could be messed with. Number 3, biology as destiny. In 7th grade, I started band. I wanted to play the drums. My parents, who lived with me, as was the custom in Montana, did not want me to play the drums. So I picked the next loudest instrument, the trumpet. How I loved my trumpet, the feel of it in my hands, its very volume and shine. You know what I especially loved? The spit valve. In 8th grade, a teacher told me about this good old trumpet player I might like, so I went out and bought one of his records. And every night for over a year, I went to sleep listening to it, the same songs over and over, trying to figure out why Louis Armstrong was so funny, so moving, so good. And I got caught up in this superstar talent of his right around the time I was beginning to suspect that I didn't have it. Talent, I mean. And there was another problem, too, which I discovered about 3 years into my trumpet career. I found out the reason I was getting a shoddy tone and I had trouble hitting the high notes was because of the shape of my jaw. The shape of my jaw. I felt the world was more or less over. I was outraged that a person's fate could depend on something as arbitrary as the angles of her teeth. And not only that, I had to switch to a brass instrument with a bigger mouthpiece, the baritone horn. The baritone horn. Like trumpets are played by Miles Davis and baritones are played by nobody. Lesson number 4, when doves cry. From the time I was 12 until I finished high school at 18, my poor parents' calendar was blackened by an ambitious roster of concerts and recitals averaging at least one per month. They were always so gushy in their support, it never dawned on me that they might have preferred to avoid junior high school gymnasium performances of the theme from Rocky. They acted as though their world revolved around my sister and me, and that's what we believed. But I remember one night after an 8th grade band concert, I caught a glimpse of pencil marks on my father's rolled-up program. He told me that he checked each movement of each piece off as they ended. Obviously, because he was counting the seconds until he could go home. And at the time, I took it badly. I was offended that he had so little regard for the seriousness of our interpretation of what do you do with a drunken sailor. But now I see those pathetic little check marks as heart-shaped symbols of his love. Everyone says that love requires the utmost honesty, but that's not entirely true. Once I knew that my father was suffering for my sake, really suffering, I learned that love, especially the parental kind, requires the heartwarming sacrifice that can only accompany fake enthusiasm. Number 5, birth of cool. So, I was doomed at the trumpet, acceptable at the baritone, shaky on the xylophone, and putrid on the piano. But there was one instrument for which I had an innate knack, an instrument I could play with some semblance of grace. It was, unfortunately, an instrument which was already on its way out during the lifetime of J.S. Bach, the recorder. I taught myself to play it when I was 11, and by 14, I was perhaps the youngest member of the American Recorders Society, reading their journal, The American Recorder, and practicing the Elizabethan and Baroque music I special ordered with my babysitting money. I found out about an amateur ensemble that met once a week in my town, playing mostly Elizabethan standards like It Was a Lover and His Lass, at a tempo marked on the metronome as post office slow. The members of the Bozeman Recorder Ensemble, as we were called, included a retired high school music teacher, 2 math professors, and a number of housewives, one of whom had a daughter in my grade. I was the only member under the age of 40, and most of them would have been eligible for the senior citizen discount at the music store. I played with them for a couple of years, until my pals Margaret and Leota and I broke off to form our own trio. The 3 of us just plain liked each other, liked playing. At school, in all those hours of actual classes with actual teachers, music felt more like a job. Playing with Leota and Margaret was the first time, the only time, I actually enjoyed playing music. And here's a little Elizabethan song we used to do called Willow, Willow, this is actually my first public performance since the Reagan administration. Which I was kind of looking forward to, and on my way here, I was walking down Market, and there was this guy on the street playing the recorder, and I kind of got a glimpse of what that looks like. I'm a little less sure. So this is Willow, Willow from a manuscript in the British Museum. Imagine playing that on the street with your 2 friends who happen to be older than your parents. And you look up from your music stand and notice one of your schoolmates staring on in horror. Andy Heap, for instance. But you know what? You don't care. You might even smile at him. And this is the most important lesson of marching band, of public displays of recorder. To withstand embarrassment. Maybe even seek it out. To take nerdiness to its most dizzying, willow, willow, tico, tico extremes, and stand before my peers with my head held high, to stick out my tongue at the Andy Heaps of the world, run back to the baritone horn of life, and blow mighty and proud.